What if I told you the next US election could decide whether your grocery bill doubles, your rent explodes, or your country goes to war again? Because somehow the rest of the world still has to pay for America's democracy. Every 4 years, the planet holds its breath, while two candidates argue about who loves freedom more. A single debate in Washington sends the yen tumbling in Tokyo, the euro wobbling in Frankfurt, and oil traders in Lagos sweating through the night. This isn't just America's election anymore, it's the world's most expensive circus, and you're about to see exactly how much it costs. Here's the part they don't advertise. When America votes, it's not choosing a president, it's setting the global economy's thermostat. And everyone else just has to live with the temperature. There's one number that explains why this happens, but first you need to understand the machine. Every institution that's supposed to be global, the IMF, the World Bank, the WTO, somehow speaks with an American accent. Need a loan? The IMF will help, but only after Washington whispers the terms. Need trade access? Better align your foreign policy first. It's democracy, but make it imperial. One signature in Washington can raise food prices in Nairobi or sink small businesses in Manila. Because the US doesn't run the world directly, it just holds the remote control. And when that remote starts glitching, when America presses the wrong button, the world doesn't just pay, it panics. Now here's that number I mentioned. Around 60% of all global foreign exchange reserves are still parked in US dollars. That means when the Federal Reserve sneezes, entire continents catch the flu. Inflation in the US? Expect rice to cost more in Asia. Interest rate hike. Expect debt traps in Africa. It's a global economic ecosystem built like a pyramid, with the US smiling from the top. The same country that lectures others about independence has designed a system where independence is mathematically impossible, but it gets worse. Because what happens when the system isn't just unfair but unstable? Let me show you what this looks like on the ground. It's 2 a.m. in Accra, Ghana. The finance minister is rewriting his country's entire budget, not because of local elections, but because of theirs. In Washington, a new president means new oil prices, new sanctions, new trade priorities. His team has spent 6 months planning infrastructure projects, healthcare expansion, education reform. One policy shift in DC, and it all becomes fiction. When US policy pivots, the shockwaves don't hit Wall Street first. They hit the streets of Karachi, Manila, and Lima. Fuel prices spike overnight. Currencies nosedive, imports vanish, and while Americans argue about inflation on cable news, families across the developing world are choosing between food and electricity. It's cruel math. When the dollar gets stronger, weaker economies bleed faster. When the Federal Reserve raises rates, debt in poorer countries multiplies like a curse. Entire governments spend their nights calculating, what if the next US president doesn't like our leader? It's not diplomacy anymore. It's survival budgeting. And yet somehow we're told this is just how the system works, as if dependency was an accident, as if the global economy didn't evolve to serve one master currency and one political circus. Whole nations are forced to gamble their futures on someone else's mood swings. A factory worker in Bangladesh watches his wages collapse because of a tariff war he didn't vote for. A shopkeeper in Nairobi can't afford inventory because her currency dropped 30% after one Federal Reserve announcement. They never got a ballot, but they're paying the price. And here's the twisted part. While the world panics, someone's getting rich. Welcome to the chaos economy, America's most reliable export. Every time Congress threatens a government shutdown or plays chicken with the debt ceiling, Wall Street doesn't panic. It throws a party because chaos refresh the news in anxiety. Hedge funds are popping champagne over market volatility. That's their favorite word, the polite way to say everyone else is losing but we're winning. When politics turns into club, traders start placing bets on the next act. Will the US default? Will a populist promise economic freedom by printing more dollars? Either way, someone's yacht just got an upgrade. Wall Street doesn't vote red or blue, they say. It votes volatility. And it's true. The more unpredictable Washington gets, the richer the financial sector becomes. Oil markets love a little drama. Nothing boosts profits like a geopolitical scare or a budget fight that makes investors nervous. Meanwhile, the average worker in Buenos Aires or Bangkok is checking exchange rates like it's a horror movie. Because what's volatility for traders is survival for everyone else. The 2024 campaign alone burned through $16 billion in political ads, turning democracy into the most expensive reality show on earth. Every channel, every platform, every influencer suddenly becomes a war correspondent for Team Red or Team Blue, because outrage sells better than truth. The media doesn't want calm. It needs chaos to stay alive. Without fear and drama, the whole machine stops spinning. So they manufacture it. The suspense music, the countdown clocks, the breaking news that breaks nothing, and it works globally. People in London, Dubai, and Seoul watch these debates like it's a new season of their favorite apocalypse drama. The anchors pretend they're defending freedom, but they're really defending advertising revenue. So while Wall Street bets on volatility, the media manufactures it. It's a perfect marriage of greed and attention, a system where truth doesn't survive the first round. But here's what nobody talks about. Every election needs a villain, and when domestic chaos isn't enough, Washington looks overseas. History has a pattern. A president's approval drops and suddenly the defense budget needs a patriotic boost. Flags wave, headlines scream, and contracts worth billions start flowing to the usual suspects. Iraq, Afghanistan, Ukraine, Taiwan. The names change, but the playbook doesn't. Rally the voters with fear, justify it with freedom, and sell it with slogans. Defense stocks soar every time tensions rise. One speech about protecting democracy can add billions to Lockheed Martin's market cap. Because in the chaos economy, war isn't failure. It's a business model. Every election cycle, the same machinery hums to life. Outrage, escalation, contracts, campaign donations. The irony? Most of the world watches in horror as its fate becomes a subplot in someone else's campaign. Add US politicians talk about foreign threats, but what they really mean is foreign. Leverage, something to exploit, not solve. And that's when the rest of the world realize we never voted for any of this. But want to know the worst part? Even America's closest friends can't escape. They call them allies. But lately it feels more like hostages with better PR. Every 4 years, Europe, Japan, and South Korea quietly brace for impact, waiting to see which version of America they'll have to adapt to next. One administration promises unity, the next threatens tariffs. One hugs NATO, the next calls it obsolete. It's like trying to build a stable house during an earthquake that's scheduled every election cycle. Allies during war, liabilities during elections. That's the unspoken truth. Each shift in Washington sends defense ministries scrambling. Global defense spending hit over $2.4 trillion in 2024, much of it justified as a reaction to US unpredictability. If America flexes its muscle, allies boost their budgets. If America retreats, they panic and boost them anyway, and the resentment simmers. European leaders talk about strategic autonomy, but they know they're still orbiting the same star. The dollar, the Pentagon, the next unpredictable vote. Japan and South Korea juggle diplomacy like a survival sport, never sure if Washington's next move will protect them or price them out. Because in this relationship, loyalty isn't rewarded, it's required. A leaked memo from a European defense official put it bluntly. We're building contingency plans, not for if America abandons us, but for when. That's not alliance politics. That's preparation for divorce. And here's the cruel joke. No matter who wins the election, nothing fundamentally changes. Every 4 years, Americans line up to choose their future. 2 candidates, 1 system, different slogans. The speeches change, the haircuts get recycled, but the global script stays. The Pentagon budget goes up. The dollar stays king. Corporate lobbyists keep their VIP seats. Foreign policy? It's like watching a rerun. Different narrator, same plot. The wars continue. The sanctions rotate, and the defense of democracy always somehow involves another arms deal. It's not left versus right. It's power versus everyone else. One side sells hope, the other sells fear, and both send the invoice to the rest of the world. Even Wall Street knows the game. Markets don't react to ideology, they react to headlines. As long as chaos is profitable, the system hums along just fine. From London to Lagos, everyone braces for change that never actually arrives. So maybe the choice isn't about who leads, but who's fooled into thinking it matters. But here's what does matter. The bill every round of political playhouse in Washington leaves a trail of economic wreckage worth trillions. Stock markets crash, inflation surges, and developing nations drown in debt they never voted for. This isn't collateral damage, it's the business model. The 2008 financial crash wiped out over $20 trillion in global wealth. COVID relief policies triggered inflation from Buenos Aires to Bangkok. And every time the US flirts with a debt default, entire currencies panic. Meanwhile, the same system that preaches free markets runs on bailouts and military contracts. It's democracy, brought to you by Visa and the Pentagon, where the slogans are free, but the interest rates aren't. Ordinary people pay for it twice, once at the gas station and again in the tax hikes that follow. Whole generations lose savings, homes, and futures just to keep the illusion of stability spinning. And for what? Another election cycle, another historic debate, another trillion-dollar hangover waiting to happen. This is why the world can't afford another US election, because we're still paying for the last one. But now, watch what happens next. Quietly, Behind the headlines and the noise, the world is drafting an escape plan. Central banks are hoarding gold instead of dollars. Trade deals are being signed in local currencies. New alliances, once dismissed as symbolic, are starting to look like insurance policies. This isn't anti-Americanism, it's self-preservation. Enter the BRICS rebellion: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. What started as an acronym has evolved into a quiet mutiny. They're tired of the dollar acting like the world's landlord, so now they're building alternatives. New payment systems, new trade routes, even a proposed BRICS currency backed by commodities instead of Washington's promises. China's already trading oil with Saudi Arabia in yuan. India's buying Russian energy outside the dollar system. And dozens of developing nations are lining up to join, whispering the same thought. Maybe it's time to stop renting stability from the US. Here's the number that should terrify Washington. BRICS nations now represent over 35% of global GDP. That's more than the G7. The economic center of gravity is shifting, and most Americans don't even know it's happening. Of course, Washington dismisses it all as symbolic, the kind of arrogance that built this rebellion in the first place. Because the world's tired of playing a game where America owns the ball, the field, and the referee. After decades of watching their economies tremble every US election cycle, countries are learning to build shock absorbers. Regional banks, digital currencies, cross-border systems that don't need Washington's permission to function. It's cautious hope wrapped in realism. The world isn't trying to destroy America's power. It's trying to survive it. Because global leadership only works when it's stable. And lately, stability has become America's most unreliable export. So as the next election looms, markets hold their breath again. But this time, fewer nations are watching in blind faith. They're preparing for a future where one country's meltdown doesn't set the planet on fire. The US dollar isn't just a currency. It's been the world's safety blanket for 80 years. But that blanket sits on a mountain of debt, now past 34 trillion and counting. That's not stability. That's a time bomb wrapped in patriotism. Yet the world kept pretending it was fine because what was the alternative? Trust another gambler at the table? Now there are other tables, other games, other currencies, and when the house starts shaking, everyone runs for gold, for alternatives, for anything that doesn't depend on the mood swings of one country's reality show. Because if the next US election goes wrong, it won't just break America. That could break the illusion that America runs the world. And maybe, just maybe, that's already happening. If you made it this far, you're in the 3% who actually understand how the global economy really works. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, because it's going to be expensive. And this time, you'll see it coming.